here. Thanks for stopping by. I just wanted to follow up on my post-diagnosis story and let you guys kind of know what happened for us about 4 to 5 months afterwards. In a previous video, I had talked about, kind of what happened up through March, and at that point, we were still just not in a panic, but every single day we knew could have potentially been the last. We really didn't know if I was going to bounce out because it seemed like I just kept perpetually getting worse and worse and worse. I wasn't yellow, I wasn't jaundiced anymore, but everything else that could have possibly been going wrong with me physically was. So as I started to lose weight, I went from 200 pounds down to about 140 pounds. And in a previous video, I talked about how a lot of that was water weight and ascites in my abdomen. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. We had to figure out how that we were going to get that liquid off of me, because what happens is the amount of fluid that I was containing, it puts your body in a perpetual state of shock. So my heart rate could be extremely low and then would shoot high for no reason at all. We would also find that I was not only having trouble sleeping and getting comfortable, but my body wouldn't allow me to sleep because my body was just fighting and fighting and fighting. So it got to a point where we began having to have what they call paracentesis done for me every 4 weeks. Now, what a paracentesis is, for those of you that are not aware, it is essentially the draining of the fluid that remains in your abdomen called ascites. Now, ascites is not like actual water. When we think of retaining water, you may think that it actually just sits in your stomach and doesn't go anywhere. It's not the case. It sits in your abdominal cavities, so you can't actually expel it through urine output or moving your bowels or anything like that. It just kind of sits. So you have to try to figure out how to dilute that. So we started with diuretics initially, just so that I wasn't retaining a lot of the fluid that I was taking in, but hopefully just being able to keep just enough of it to stay hydrated. That was a failed attempt for many, many months. I was extremely dehydrated because my fluid intake was so limited, and what was going in was just going into my gut. So it was very, very, it felt like a very perilous time because there was just no end to it. My face was extremely gaunt and thin. You could see all the bones in my face, my neck, and my upper chest. And I was just like, I was shaped like a pear, literally like a pear. So it was decided that once at least my heart rate and other things had kind of gotten balanced out, that they would begin doing paracentesis. And essentially, without going into too much graphic detail, it's considered a day surgery operation, and it has to be ordered by your gastroenterologist. And what they'll do is you come in and they do a local anesthetic in your abdomen, and then they insert a needle into your abdomen and with some suction begin to drain the fluid. Now, you would be amazed as to how much fluid that your body can actually retain. Needless to say, it's extremely painful. At the most that they ever took, they took 20 liters of fluid off of me, which is essentially around 41 pounds, give or take, of just liquid. And you can imagine what that does to your body if your normal body weight was 200 pounds and then suddenly you drop down to 120 pounds, but then you rapidly gain all of this weight back, which is all fluid. So when they're doing the paracentesis, you're essentially losing body weight as that happens. So if you drastically lose 40 pounds all at once, your body will go into further shock. So I want to caution you as to, if you do find yourself in that spot, how much you allow the hospitals to take from you. They're not used to people being very knowledgeable about this process. and what actually goes into it. So I'm trying to give you just a little bit of information that I had to kind of learn the hard way. Usually they would take anywhere, the average was about 12 liters of fluid that they would take off about every 28 days. I eventually ended up getting a standing order from my GI doc, which is somewhat uncommon for them to happen. You have to have a very extreme case. But they will try other avenues, as they did with me, before making that final leap, working with your nephrologist, adjusting your diuretics, adjusting your intake. So this is really a last-ditch effort when all other efforts have failed to get that fluid removed. Now, it does make it easier for those first couple of days because now you're just thirsty and it feels so good to just be able to drink fluid and not really have to worry about retention, because now your gut essentially is empty. But you have to be careful because it will begin to build up just as quick, which in my case, every 28 days. So it does seem hopeless. It seems like there's no end. Eventually, after several months, I began feeling like it was just going to be a permanent fixture in my life. And it was something that I was accepting of, but it really didn't sound like fun. And it's really not a long-term solution because it does take a major toll on your other organs, on your abdomen in general. The pressure that gets put on the internal organs. One of the things that I found is that I was constantly out of breath. The reason for that was because there was so much fluid in my abdomen, it was literally pushing my lungs up. So I was never able to take full, long, and deep breaths. And so once that fluid is removed and you try to take a deep breath, you start coughing a lot because those bottom parts of your lungs, in my case, weren't used to it. I mean, they were kind of not shriveled, but they had kind of shrunken up. So it takes a while for your lungs to be able to expand, again. So having all that fluid almost treats your lungs like an accordion because it presses on your diaphragm. It's difficult to eat because your stomach's being constricted. Your being able to use the restroom is hard because your intestines, everything's just cramped. So eventually we increased my diuretics to the maximum amount that they would allow for me to take. And there were two different kinds, and they were very high doses. So once we had gotten the initial amount of fluid off, this was in June of 2021, is when they took the most from me. It's when they took the 20 liters. After that, each month they would get less and less and less. The next month they took 16 liters. The month after that, they took 14, then 12, then 6, and then 5. Eventually, they didn't have to remove anymore. Just because I felt that I wasn't retaining fluid did not mean that I wasn't. So I still went to the hospital to have abdominal scans to make sure that there wasn't any extra ascites building up. If there is some, it's not doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have the procedure done, because it is dangerous. In a lot of ways. It is a needle that is about 10 inches long, and again, you don't feel it. It doesn't hurt. They do a very, very good job of numbing you, but obviously that can take an internal impact on you because there are a lot of major arteries, that are going from your heart down into your legs, branching out into your femoral arteries. So it's very, very, it sounds simple, and the whole process actually takes about 30 minutes once you're actually down and they put the adhesive in and they begin to drain. After that, you will almost certainly be very anemic because there's not just water in that ascites, there's a lot of proteins and a lot of other types of things that are in there. So you have to try to kind of supplement and get some of that stuff back. So really, really be cautious. If there's just, a liter or so there, most likely that they're not going to do it because it's not worth it. That can be removed via other paths that your doctors may give you different options to do. So after that, they will replace you. They'll put you on typically an IV. Anytime they take any more than 5 liters for sure, they'll put you on what they call albumin, which is a human blood product that comes from blood donation. So anytime you donate blood or anything like that, that's where a lot of these things come from. And essentially, what it is it's putting a whole lot of uh, human blood making materials and things like that back into your system. It's completely safe. Obviously, it's just like receiving a blood transfusion. It is not specific to your blood type, to my knowledge. It very well may be, but it was never brought up to me specifically about that. But it also is very, very important to make sure that they do know your blood type. Typically, they may do that behind the scenes without you even knowing. When they draw blood, they'll type your blood, probably put it in your file somewhere. But it's important to know your blood type. Mine is O negative, so it's very, very important that I make my providers aware of that up front. But know that if you do find yourself getting a paracentesis, that it sucks. I'm not going to lie. It does suck being part of, just your normal routine. But for me, it paid dividends because until you get that fluid off, you can't be operated on. There's a lot of things they can't do. A colonoscopy, if you need to have one, to have your gastro stuff checked out for your GI. So it's really, really important that gets managed before you can move forward. My Vanderbilt providers were also very aware of that was happening. I was having it done here locally in my hometown, and they were just being informed as the process was going, and as I was getting less and less, and then obviously continuing to be monitored. I get ultrasounds usually every 2 or 3 months just to make sure that everything abdominally is not being retained. It still shows the scarring in my liver. It still shows all of those other things that we know that are there that we know will not heal, that quite frankly are painful and have impacts on appetite, your energy level, and things like that. But it's not uncommon. It's actually very, very common for people that have the ender stages of liver disease and decomposition. So that's all I have for today. I hope you find this to be helpful. If you have any questions or comments, just put them in the comments below. Please remember to like and subscribe. And I've also put a link to my Facebook page down in the description that's focused around end-stage liver disease, cirrhosis, and support. So there's a whole lot of really good information there. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you guys later.